Like my first Red Sox game ever, I was like 8. Some guy behind me, when they hit a home run, he stood up and spilt his entire beer on top of my head and then proceeded to buy me everything that was there as an apology. So it was pretty much the greatest game ever, and that's why I fell in love with baseball.
Welcome to the Beautiful Work Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Krikorian. Each episode we feature a special guest from all walks of life and ask them to explore the ins and outs, the ups and downs, the trials and the triumphs of their chosen field. Writers, musicians, coaches, business owners, artists, and everything in between. We peel back the curtain to hear their stories, to walk their paths, to find out how they breathe life into their beautiful work. Well, I am really excited for today's show. Jamie Kent, a songwriter, musician, businessman extraordinaire, has a lot of fun stuff to share about what he does and how he does it. And he's a really exciting and funny, energetic, forward-thinking guest. So can't wait to get to him. Thank you to everyone who has been sharing and following along and downloading the first month and a half or so of the podcast. It's honestly more than I expected, and I'm just really excited. And I think it's the quality of the guests and the interviews that they've given it's really been fun to be a part of it. It's been fun to produce these and to bring them to you guys. And thank you for all of you who've been sharing it, whether it's on Facebook or iTunes or Spotify or anywhere that you can get this podcast. Your shares and your likes and you passing it along, it just really helps. And we're excited for the growth. And so thank you very much to all of you guys. For those that are new to the podcast, welcome. Today's episode, Jamie Kent is the 7th episode of the podcast, and we have many more to come. Some personal announcements. On the last podcast, we announced that my new album, Grandeur, which is my 5th record, will be out January the 18th. That's the 3rd Friday in January. It's a 16-song record. It's taken almost 4 years to record, and I cannot wait to share it. And there'll be much more about that as we get closer to the release date. But mark your calendars, January 18th, and it'll be followed by touring and live shows all spring and summer of 2019. If you want to find out more, dankrikorian.com has all my music, and it also has all the previous episodes for this podcast. And so please go to that and check it all out. Okay, let's get to the show. Jamie is fantastic and an old friend, another friend of mine who I met in the great city of Reading. So without further ado, let's get to the show. Jamie Kent is a singer-songwriter hailing from the great state of Massachusetts, but now lives and works in Nashville, Tennessee. Named by RollingStone.com as an artist you need to know and dubbed a, quote, must-watch artist by the Huffington Post, one might say the future of Jamie Kent is on the rise. Jamie's music draws on influences from modern country rock artists such as Jason Isbell, Will Hodge, as well as pays tribute to classics like Bob Dylan and Tom Petty. Jamie has no fear of hard work, playing over 150 shows a year, including touring with Huey Lewis and the News, the Doobie Brothers, America, Brothers Osborne, Brandy Clark, Mark Broussard, and many more. Kent's 2016 release, All American Mutt, debuted at number 16 on the top country charts, being the only independent artist to break into the top 20. In September of 2018, Kent released his single, Ain't No Jesus, which again was named by RollingStone.com a song you must know. Jamie is here today to talk about his life so far in the music industry, touring, writing, running a business, and just how much he loves the Boston Red Sox. Okay, I'm joined now by Jamie Kent. Jamie, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It's great to have you.
It's great to be here, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I want to start out today with, I know you're a Boston sports fan. You're from that area. And I got to ask you, so if you had the opportunity to go to let's say a Game 7 playoff game or, a big time game for either the Celtics, the Red Sox, the Patriots, or the Bruins, which one of those Boston area teams would you love to see a big time playoff game?
Red Sox all the way.
That was easy for you.
Oh yeah, I grew up playing baseball, being a huge baseball fan. I even umped Little League baseball for a few years when I was first touring as a side hustle. So baseball is probably my favorite sport. I love all the Boston sports. I'm a huge Pats fan, huge Celtics fan, but there's nothing like being at Fenway. Fenway is a magical place. I just got tickets from my parents to go this week, and it was Pedro bobblehead day. So I was like, I got these tickets for you, but you better find me a Pedro bobblehead.
And I know you and I were talking a little bit before the show, and you actually had a song played with the Red Sox. Is that correct? A couple of years ago?
I did, yeah. A few years back, they used one of my songs, Changes, in a promo for their playoff run. And pretty much my life peaked at that moment.
So maybe eventually when Sweet Caroline gets phased out, they can phase yours into that 7th inning stretch.
That's right. Put me in, coach.
Yeah, I had a chance. My mom's side of the family is from Boston, and a couple of years ago, we all went out there on a big trip and visited our cousins that still live out there. And we went to a Red Sox game at Fenway, and they were actually just happenstance. We're playing the Angels, which is from down the street from me.
Oh yeah.
But the game had a rain delay in the middle of the game, and then it was really a fun game. But then there's that bar after the game down in center field. Have you been to that bar?
Oh yeah, yeah. The bleacher bar. Yeah, the bleacher bar.
Yeah, that was
fantastic.
That was a good
man.
time.
You're like watching from under the bleachers. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, that was a fun experience for sure. So
my first Red Sox game ever, I was like 8, and I was in the bleachers with my parents, and some guy behind me, when they hit a home run, he stood up and spilt his entire beer on top of my head, and then proceeded to buy me everything that was there as an apology. So it was pretty much the greatest game ever, and that's why I fell in love with baseball.
Yeah, and it's funny. Your music has a sort of I don't know how to describe it, but like it fits the baseball feel, sort of that Americana type of feel, so I can see it and feel it in the music for sure.
Well, I appreciate that, man. That's a high compliment.
I want to start in on your musical endeavors, and there's quite a lot of them. But you and I met a while back in a nice little town of Redding, California, crossing paths up there, and I think we shared the bill together that night as we were going our different directions. Maybe you were heading north, I was heading south, or vice versa. I'm not quite sure. That's normally how you meet people in Redding. You're going one way or the other.
Exactly.
I remember that night watching you on stage and being really drawn into kind of how much like fun you seem to have in your live shows. And as you know, I've sort of followed your career and the videos you put out, the covers that you do, your live show. You know, you seem to be able to kind of grab the fun part of performing and music. And is that something that you've made a conscious effort to go after, or is that just sort of who you are, or a little bit of both?
I would say it's a little bit of both. I think, you know, your music, someone's music and their show has to be a reflection of them. Otherwise it's not authentic. And I think people can see through that right away. But for me, also on a kind of another level, to me, a live show has to be fun and exciting and full of moments. Otherwise, people can just stay at home and listen to your record, you know? It's got to be a different sort of transcendent experience to keep people coming and to make them spread the word. And so for me, I've always built my shows based on like a series of moments rather than, okay, we got an hour and a half. How many songs is that? No, sorry, how many moments is that? Whether it's a story, whether it's a sing-along moment, whether it's a stand-up bass solo. Those are things that people leave and they remember moments rather than just songs. So that's kind of how I've always structured it and kind of my mission and my kind of vision for our live show.
And that's a really great thing you hit on with moments, because I know, that's what you're trying to have them leave with. And is that something that you've learned throughout your career to kind of go from, you know, hey, I'm going to play 10 songs, or to, you know, now what you're doing with the moments and stuff? Is that developed over time, or did you always kind of know about that?
It's developed over time. I would say I feel like I learned it somewhat early. And I think a big part of that education actually came from a guy that I toured with early on named Ellis Paul. And he's a folk troubadour from Boston originally as well. And he just is one of the greatest entertainers and storytellers that I've ever seen. And I kind of learned that from, you know, I'd open the show and then watch his, and every night it was different, but he had a series of moments that were all in his back pocket, and he kind of shuffled them around depending on the crowd, depending on how the crowd was reacting. He would put in a different moment and put in this thing. And I was like, wow, that's how a show should be done, whether it's in a folk listening room or on a stadium. The moments change and the size changes. And I've noticed that with my career too. Like when we've played, we spent a bunch of time on the road opening up for Huey Lewis and the News, and
right,
those were in some big amphitheaters, and you can't do the same moments that you can do in the listening room, but you can create different ones, and they're bigger ones, and they just have to grab people's attention, especially when they've never heard of you.
Right. And you just hit on Huey Lewis and the News, and you've had the opportunity to tour with and open for some really cool people over the past 3 or 4 years. Huey Lewis and the News. I've got the Doobie Brothers, America, among others. I know the list goes on and on because you've done a lot of stuff. What is it that you're kind of gleaning from those artists as you're opening for them that they do that allows them to stay at the top of their profession?
I'd say, it always comes down to the song. That's a big thing.
Uh-huh.
All of these guys are where they are because their songs are incredible and they hold the test of time, regardless of what genre or what the production was. It's just, they're great songs. And then I've been fortunate enough to be on the road with just some great people too. And I think that is what also holds the test of time, is being a great person, because there are so many people that want to be in this industry and are waiting next in line for you to screw up or be an asshole and do these things. And,
right.
And so in order to get there, you have to be good to people. You have to treat people well. that you have to foster loyalty. And like Huey's band and Huey's crew, they're a family. They've been together for 30 years. And, you can see that, you can feel that, the way they treat people. You almost get the sense that he's still touring today because they're a family and he wants to support the whole family. And that's inspiring,
Sure. Yeah. And, it's interesting as I've interviewed 2 or 3 other musicians on this podcast, and some of them, have opened for some really cool people like yourself. And they've all said very similar things about the sort of family feel that the top-notch pros have, and also just their dedication to the craft. Where they're not just on the road hanging out and partying and having a great time, which I'm sure they do as well, but they are really true pros at whatever it is that they do night in, night out.
Truth. Yep. 100%.
On that note, I was going to ask you, how did the Huey Lewis and the News opening slot, how did that come about?
I feel like a lot of things come about when, or success comes about when it's like when hard work meets opportunity. And that was, I think hard work creates luck as well. And it creates, chances to be unlucky and chances to be lucky, depending on, you know what I mean? Like you get told no a bunch of times, but eventually you get told yes. And that if you're ready for it, then that you can turn that yes into 10 other yeses. And that's kind of how it happened. We had a fan at a booking agency. They weren't our booking agent, but they liked what we did. And, Huey had one opener for 3 years, and that opener had the same manager as Huey. And Huey and the manager split. And so the opener went with the manager, and we got called the week of, being like, hey, they need an opener in New Jersey tomorrow. Can you be there?
Wow.
And I was like, hell yeah, we'll be there. I'll cancel whatever we're doing and drive down. And so we did it. And then we were lucky enough that Huey and his manager caught our set on side stage at this theater, and they liked what we did. And so they offered us a few more shows that summer. And then the next year they were like, hey, we want to make you the only opener this summer. And that happened for 2 more years. So that, we got the opportunity, we seized the opportunity, and
sure.
We had been playing 200 shows a year, getting ready for moments like that. And so the show was there. And I think Huey really liked that we interacted with the crowd. And I kind of take pride in, if you're an opener, your job is to get the crowd excited and ready for the next person. Then they don't have to work to get the crowd there. They're already there, and they can take it to the next level.
And I've always, going back to you, having a fun show, and, you've done years and years and years of developing that show. And so when this opportunity hit, obviously you guys were ready. Can you describe, though, maybe the feeling, I don't know if it's nerves or excitement, whatever it would be, when you're getting ready to play, opening act in an arena in front of Huey Lewis and the News?
Yeah, it's sort of surreal because you just haven't been in that situation yet. So like at first it's nerves, but then you're like, you know what? This is a show like any other show. The lights are blinding. You can't really see the crowd. So just go out there and do what you do.
Right.
There's some new sensations, like the sound of a large amphitheater sound system is way huger. You're hearing echoes off the buildings miles away and that kind of thing, which is pretty cool.
Sure.
And, you're nervous for as you walk onto stage, and then once you're in the first song, you're in your show again. And if you've done it enough, it's just muscle memory and part of your thing. And then you just do it.
Opened some shows myself for some cool acts. And it's always, it's an interesting feeling of like, yeah, your job is to get this crowd ready to go, but also you want them to love your stuff. And so it's always a great opportunity for artists. So,
100%, man.
Kind of going back to what you talked about with opportunity and luck and, working hard. That's one of the things I've really always been impressed with, from afar, your career, because your ability to play shows and market and write and, find sponsorships. You seem like you're just kind of, you're always doing something. And where does the motivation come from to do all that?
I think it's just something I was born with. I have always been a hustler and, never like to be bored. I always like to be busy.
Uh-huh.
I don't like free time sitting around. So I'm always like, well, what can I be doing with that? And I figure the next thing out. And I'm one of the weird musicians that went to business school. I was kind of choosing between music school and business school, knowing I wanted to do music, but wanting to take a different approach to it than other people and not get screwed over with bad deals. And so I went to Babson College in Boston, which is a school that specializes in entrepreneurship, and they just taught me to think differently. They taught me to view what I do as a business, regardless of what it is, and that would kind of set me apart from other people. And I think it has. I'm able to I think life is about reciprocity with people and providing mutual value. And if you can do that, then you can put together almost any kind of deal, whether it's from a show where you view, okay, the venue is not doing me a favor by booking me. We're doing each other a favor. So I have to bring people and they have to provide a great place for people to listen to music. And if either of us doesn't do that, then it can't sustain itself. And you can take that from there to an endorsement deal with someone like Bose, where, they can hook me up with gear, but if I don't help promote them and genuinely believe in what they do, then it's just a one-way thing and it won't last. And because I take pride in, in that kind of reciprocity, I've been able to have some long-term fruitful partnerships that way. And as an independent artist, I think those partnerships are almost my label. It's their distribution sources and their marketing sources, and they allow me to get on to an audience that normal independent artists wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And I've always liked how you've looked at that as a business. And I think, and you probably see it all the time in Nashville and wherever you tour, that so many young artists feel like, okay, well, I wrote 2 or 3 great songs. I deserve getting all of these things. Yep. Mm-hmm. And it just doesn't happen that way.
Right. It's true. And the thing that I learned in Nashville over everything else is that you can't just be really good. You have to be undeniably great, because there are so many people that want to do music now. I was meeting with my digital distribution partners this week, and they told me that there are currently 40 to 60,000 songs being uploaded to streaming platforms a day.
Wow.
Which is incredibly overwhelming and insane.
It's insane.
And so you got to put that in perspective. It's like, okay, so if I am going to succeed in this industry that is fun and that everyone wants to be a part of because it's fun and because it's cool, then you can't, when I moved to Nashville, I was like, I got so many great songs. And then I realized, well, I've got a lot of really good songs, and if I'm going to push to that next level, I need to hone my writing craft and only put out really great songs. And I went from writing 25 songs a year before I moved here to 150 songs a year, and, becoming 100 times pickier with my lyrics and 100 times pickier with production. And because it's just there's just so many people that want to do it.
Got some great points in there that I wanted to pick out. And I was recently watching with my wife. We were watching the Mr. Rogers movie that came out.
So good.
Yeah, it was such a good movie. And there was a quote in there about when he was writing songs or something, and he had a couple good ones or something. And it was either a producer or somebody, I'm blanking, but basically told him, hey, come back when you have a barrel full of songs, and then we can work. Right. And kind of to what your point was, is that you got to write, 150 to find 10.
Totally. You really do. Yep.
Well, I was going to also just mention in there that Babson is not easy to get into. So I know you're a smart guy. It's a tough school.
Yeah, it kicked my ass for a good bit. Greatest education I've really had was, I just see the world differently because of that school. It puts people talk about being able to, teach entrepreneurship and that you can't teach entrepreneurship, but what you can teach is like a filter that you just look at the world differently with. And that's really what it is at the essence. And it's hard to put a finger on, but that's what I learned there. And I just see opportunities different than most people because of that place.
I went to business school myself out here at Chapman, and
that's a great school, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But Babson's basketball is unbelievable. Babson's been in the Final Four for men's basketball, won a national title a couple years ago.
That's right.
And so I know the school well from the basketball side and whatnot. So kudos to you there.
Thank you, my friend.
Well, you kind of hit on it a little bit with the Nashville stuff, but I wanted to dig into that a little bit deeper. So you decided how many years ago now? 6, 7, 5 to move to Nashville?
Yeah, about 5 years ago.
Okay. And you just talked a lot about it, but could you dig in more about the change that you saw in your career when you decided to make that move?
Yeah, I think the thing about Nashville is that everybody here is doing music, more or less, you know, from all of the industry being here to your waiter is an aspiring songwriter or musician hustling on the side. Uh-huh. So literally everybody. And that is a beautiful and overwhelming thing, depending on your perspective. And it can swallow people up really quickly because you just become one of the masses there. But if you're willing to work hard, I really truly believe there's not a better place to be because everybody's doing that. The opportunity to turn one meeting into 5 meetings in a day just based on a conversation and proximity and everybody knowing each other. It's just kind of mind blowing. Even just like playing pickup soccer. Like you play soccer with heads of record labels and, you know, marketing executives and that's, you just become friends with people because of everyone there is doing the same thing. And that, you know, that can only happen in a music town like this.
I'm guessing you pass them the ball a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
You make sure they score.
That's right.
Sorry, yeah. but go on.
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, so that's really the thing with it. If you're willing to kind of put your head down and work hard, like that goes a long way in this town. When I was in Massachusetts, I felt like my work ethic was viewed as a weird thing. And people just viewed me more as a business person than a musician. And here it's like, oh, you're a musician and you work hard. Great. You just made my life a lot easier. Let's talk about what we can do together.
That's cool. 'Cause the whole town sort of just operates like that.
Right.
Or at least the people that are really deep into it operate like that.
Yep. That's right.
So getting to sort of how you operate, one of the things that you've always had and you talk about kind of supporting your career is what you call the collective, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Could you kind of explain what that is and then also what that's meant to your career?
Yeah. So the collective, I started it right as I graduated Babson. I did a research project on cooperatives because when you're in business school, they teach you about ways to exit strategies for business. So most of the time it's either someone sells their company or they go public. But there's this third option that not a lot of people do, but the ones that do it are really successful. And that's selling your company back to your employees. And I just loved this idea. And I was like, how could I apply that to music? And so I started this thing. And a collective and a cooperative are the same thing, except for a cooperative is technically a nonprofit and has a bunch of rules, and a collective doesn't. So I thought, well, why don't I allow fans to invest in my career from the beginning and then have them be a more intimate part of the journey? And I did, and I put it out to my kind of circle of network, and I was able to raise like 15 to 20 grand right off the bat. And it allowed me to not have to get a day job and just focus on touring and building up my live shows for the first year to a point where then the live shows were supporting me. So it really, I couldn't have done it without the collective. And then over the course of the years, it's been interesting to see, like that was before any like Kickstarter or any of those things existed. And as those things have grown and the platforms have gotten better, it's really cool to see that model take off on such a big level. And now probably my favorite version of it is Patreon.
Right.
Patreon is basically the collective with a better platform.
Okay.
and I appreciate and respect that. And, it's like getting people involved for the long term. And I think that in order to support yourself as an independent musician, the support of your best fans is integral, and people really want to support you and lift you up in that journey, and giving them exclusive content. And in my case, I gave them a vote in decisions I made. So they helped pick my album artwork and what singles should be. And they hear everything first before everybody else. And so that's been cool. And, I've, over the years, I've relied less and less on the collective for my, support and income, but they've been still my, most loyal fans, and I'll always push that and always remember them and always give them stuff before everybody else because of that.
That's great. I remember I read something a while back, and it's always been out there as, if you can get to like 1,000 true fans in your career, then basically you can have a career for as long as you want, because they'll support you, they'll buy your merch, your stuff. And so,
it's true.
Going back to what you said about Nashville and how everybody's doing something, and all the songs that are being released daily. It is daunting to think about and trying to think, well, how the heck can I make a career? But when you strip it down to, what, if I can just keep adding to my true base, the market's not as scary.
That's true. I mean, the fortunate and unfortunate thing all at once is that it's sort of clear, if you want to do music as a career, you pretty much just have to be willing to tour, and tour regularly. If you're not willing to do that, then it's really difficult to make an income touring, or an income as a musician,
right?
Or do it full time. It's totally possible, and through things like Patreon and through touring like that, it's never been more possible to be a middle class musician, which is awesome. But it also requires a certain lifestyle, which is really hard. So that it has trade-offs, but it's a reality. And I tell people that when they ask for advice on how to get started, I'm like, if you're going to do this, you have to be willing to tour 150, 200 days a year. Are you cool with that? Is your family cool with that? Because that's it. You got to devote a bunch of years to doing that to get to that point where it is sustainable.
So, and you just hit on it a little bit, but what are some of the things that you've had to give up in your pursuit of your musical career?
Yeah, I think foundationally, I left home, left being around family and some of my closest friends for that. But I also, I met my wife when she's from our same hometown, and we met while I was touring. So she's always known that this is what I do. And, there wasn't an outward sacrifice there. But, as we get older and start, settling down, I don't want to tour 150, 200 days a year. So, like all my whole life, that's hard, so you got to then get creative, and how can you supplement, and how can you tour, 75 days a year, and where do you make up those other 75 shows? Can it be writing? Can it be writing for film and TV? Can it be, producing someone else's album? And there's lots of possibilities, but you got to still be willing to work as hard. Just get creative,
Sure. So on that count too, for those on the outside wondering what a career in music or songwriting looks like, can you describe for us sort of an average day for you?
Yeah, I am, I do a bunch of things, but I would say on an average day, I wake up at like 8 a.m. I work on my computer for 2 hours on business stuff, whether it's booking, whether it's contracting, whether it's producing a show. And then often, probably 3 days a week, I'll have a writing session from like 11 to 3. And I will go write. And now I pretty much write for 3 things. I used to just write to write, and then I realized that kind of wasted a lot of time.
Okay.
But now I sort of write, it's either for me, for another artist, or for film and TV.
Okay.
And kind of go in there with a very specific goal in mind, and it can be a lot more productive that way. Then I do that, and then I'll probably, after the writing session, I'll put another couple hours into computer work and maybe a couple of meetings with people, and then I'll play a show at night. Or, if I'm home, I won't play a show, but that weekends at least.
Okay.
But often it's a 10 or 12 hour day.
And when you go to these writing sessions, is it mostly solo or one other person, or do you have writing partners now that you're going to write with?
Oh yeah, most of the time it's co-writing. So usually it's at least one person, sometimes 2 other people.
Okay.
Often it's a producer who can build tracks. And then it's myself, who's usually more on the lyric side, and then a melody person, another singer, or if it's for me, then it's for myself. And that's a thing. But usually we kind of define the roles at the start of it. Like, okay, who is this for? Who's going to handle different things? And then we all have input on all of it, but we kind of let the person with that strength run with that ball.
Okay. And going back to your average, or typical day, I think it's so interesting because I think sort of a lot of people think about, musician, the lazy musician that, sleeps until noon or 1 o'clock and then, gets up and maybe goes to the show and hangs out all night. And
right.
Your average day is much more of a, it's a business day. You're clocking in and doing your work.
It is. Yeah. 100%. Because I would rather do that than have to have a side job. And that's, typically the difference of the musician that gets to sleep in and do all those things. That's fine. But they're usually working late into the night at a restaurant or a bar or that kind of thing, So that's, I take pride in being able to work all day on what I want to do.
I first met Jamie in the Northern California town of Redding, where we shared a show together at a venue called Vintage as we were crossing paths on tour. What struck me right away about Jamie was how infectious he and his band were on stage and the amount of energy they put into their live show. Not only were they great musicians, but they were showmen as well, deeply committed to providing moments like Jamie mentioned earlier in the podcast. I've had the fortune thus far in my career of seeing and playing alongside many musicians, and the really great ones always possess some undeniable trait that audiences and musicians gravitate towards. Whether it's a powerful voice, blistering guitar work, a unique look or sound, catchy songs, or some various form of the it factor. Jamie no doubt possesses some of these qualities, but what has always stood out to me, beyond the musical attributes, is his boundless persistence in furthering his career from multiple angles, from touring, songwriting, promotion, networking. Jamie embraces it all and continues to thrive on and off the stage. Former President Calvin Coolidge once quoted, "Nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent." kind of on that songwriting route and how you work, has your process of writing a song, and you hit on a little bit, but has it changed over the years of how you just view a song and how you go about writing it?
Yes and no. I think the purpose of it has changed. Like how I write songs is still fairly similar, but I think now it all has to have a purpose. Like when you hear that there are 40,000 songs being uploaded a day, you can't just write a song for shits and giggles. You kind of got to be like, okay, why does the world need this song? You know?
Sure.
And I think that to me also like adds impact to the lyrics of it and trying to, change someone's life in some, positive way and have it, have the melody be big enough that it can reach a bunch of people and that kind of thing. But just a purpose that is what's changed in my writing, I'd say. And
in general, do you feel like, at the heart of a song, when you start to write or you feel like you have something, are you a melody first guy, a lyrics first guy, a rhythm first guy? Like, how do you feel a song coming? I'm a combination of melody and lyrics first. What I often do, because I do so much co-writing, is I have what I call like a hook book, and it's kind of a memo pad that just has a ton of lyrical ideas that will pop into my head from time to time. And instead of just running with it myself, I'll capture that, save it for when I have a write with somebody that I feel like is a good fit for it. And I do the same with melodies too, or on the vocal memos on my phone. I have a ton of melodic ideas that are just, if you heard them, you'd probably laugh because they're, No, I do too. Yeah. So you know that. Yeah, right. And I kind of save those things. So yeah, I just try to match them accordingly. If it's another artist, what am I fit? If I get a brief for a TV show that is looking for a specific kind of thing, then I go and look through what I got and see if I have anything that matches that and run with it from there, that kind of thing. I want to talk about some of your recent endeavors and songs on that front. So you just had a song come out, Ain't No Jesus, that's been doing great. And I wanted to let you kind of talk about that and what it's doing right now. Yeah, it just came out about a week ago, and it got lucky. We somehow was in Rolling Stone twice in the first week, which is pretty cool. Great. But they named it A Song You Need to Know, so that's cool. And it's probably one of my more personal songs that I've ever written. And I wrote it in kind of a full circle way with that guy, Ellis Paul, who was one of the first guys I toured with and learned a lot from. And we wrote it, and it's sort of touching on, our human imperfections and my personal imperfections, and how I was lucky enough to find someone that loves me, not despite the imperfections, but because of them. It's also my first fully self-produced track as well that I've released in the world. So. Wow. And that's a big deal, and that's really cool. Did you enjoy that part of the process? Yeah, I loved it, man. I feel like, I've had the opportunity to work with some great producers over the years, and I've just been soaking it in and learning and taking my favorite parts of each of their processes and kind of applying it to my own. And it's cool. I've produced other people, but this was the first time that I've been like, you know what? I'm just producing myself on this one, and did it with my band, and we did it in a great studio here in Nashville. And Ain't No Jesus, actually, it's funny. We recorded it about a year ago, at Sweetwater, the big music place in Indiana, and they lost the session. Oh, wow. And forever I was trying to get it, and they were trying to find it, and then it's just disappeared into the ether. So we were recording our upcoming EP, and we had about 30 minutes before my guitar player had to leave. And I was like, you know what, guys, I don't know if we're going to get Ain't No Jesus from the other session. Let's just see if we can lay it down. We've been playing it live, and we laid it down in 30 minutes. Wow. That's a cool story. I mean, not cool they lost it, but I feel like, in 20 years when you're selling out stadiums, that song is going to pop up. They're going to find it, and that's going to be the Dylan basement tapes deal.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Someone probably spilt coffee on a hard drive and they didn't want to admit it. So it goes.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to capture it, and I love how the song sounds. It has a great feel, a great message, and
thanks,
and I'm
man.
glad it's doing so well. The Rolling Stones thing, that's huge.
Yeah, it's cool, man. I feel very fortunate to have their blessing on it, and hopefully it keeps rolling and keeps growing. You know, that's the goal.
I want to pivot a little bit to, you know, I know you recently got married. You got a house. You're kind of going into this new part of, you know, adulting, as they call it.
That's true.
How is this transition into these types of things in your life sort of maybe changed your outlook on your career at all?
You know what? I think it's just caused me to, I mentioned it briefly, but it's just caused me to say, okay, what can I do to make things the most sustainable over the course of time, and, you know, and not have it be quite as grueling on the road. And cause I love touring and I'll never want to stop touring, but I don't necessarily want to play all those gigs that I did, because some of them were just to pay the bills. And so how can you create, or how can I create different things that can also involve my music and what I do, but also, you know, take some of the pressure off being on the road as much. And yeah, it's been fun. Like I've done it, you know, I delved into the film and TV thing a lot more and had some success with that. And, a business partner and I, we are in the process of launching a really cool regional tour right now called the Rising Star Roadshow. Kind of based on this idea that, you know, I learned to create a tour because I had the business education, but a lot of people don't. And if touring is the thing that's going to support independent artists in the future, and what's left, you know, as CD sales kind of dwindle, then how can we create a regional tour that we can? So basically the idea is that we have one backing band, 4 artists on a show, and the stage rotates every 3 or 4 songs. Cool. And the crowd comes out to see the show, not any one artist, but it allows kind of the cream to rise from the top. And then you see it gives a platform to plug a new artist into 10 and 15 cities and allow them to, if they're really kicking ass, to take off in those cities and come back to them. And then allows us to write with those artists and, sign an artist if they're really great and that kind of thing. And then at the same time kind of give back. So every community we go to, we partner with a school and we bring their choir into the show and collaborate with them and then raise money for their music program at the same time. So it's kind of trying to capture rising stars at all different levels, from the kids to aspiring artists.
Wow, that sounds like a great endeavor, and that's something you're working on for next spring or summer, or when are you thinking of?
Yeah, well, so we've already done 5 shows on it, kind of beta testing the model, and they've been bigger than we expected. Like we thought it was going to be, you know, 300 person rooms, and it turned out we ended up selling out a couple 700 person theaters, which is awesome. Wow. Yeah, so it's been we're growing it to scale, and it's starting small, but you know, I think it's going to really ramp up in 2019 and try to lock in that kind of 15 cities.
Well, excited to see where that goes, and we'll definitely keep our eyes and ears peeled.
We'll have to get you on one of them, Dan.
Hey, I'm ready. Just give me.
All right.
I'm ready to go. I want to ask you, do a kind of a segment of, I'd like to read you some lyrics that you've written over the course of your career and some of your songs. and just you don't have to, because I know that, you know, as a songwriter, you don't need to explain what they mean, but I guess maybe just give your reaction in a sense of what the lyric means, not maybe means to you, but what comes back from it, if that's all right.
Yeah,
so I got just a couple of my favorite from yours. So the first one is this: ain't it funny how the good ones always come from nothing? I may be broke, but I am not broken.
Yeah, man. It's just, that's me at the core, you know, coming starting from scratch and clawing my way up. That's it. You know, it's an honestly me.
Well, you know, I've always loved ain't it funny how the good ones always come from nothing. Do you remember where or when you penned that lyric?
I did. Yeah, I was in LA writing then, and I was crashing on a friend's couch and had just had my rental car broken into, and
Wow.
and was just musing about you know, how the beginning, everything was at the beginning, and people can. I didn't have anything to take. They literally looked through my bag and didn't take anything. So I was like, all right, that's where I am. I'm broke, but not broken, man. I'm going to keep chugging along.
Right. Yeah. I've always, in that, to me, you know, and everybody, and you know this, people take your lyrics and it's whatever it means to them. You know, it might mean something totally different to you, but it's kind of the nice thing about art in general is,
exactly.
And I've always loved that first line. Funny how the good ones always come from nothing. I attribute that a little bit to lyrics sometimes. So like, you know, you work and work and work and work on a lyric or a song and it's just not quite there. And then all of a sudden you'll just be driving, you know, on the 405 and boom, there's some lyric that it seems like it comes out of nowhere and it's the perfect thing.
That's right. The channel opens and you got to run with it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, I better pull out that my iPhone and get it on that memo.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, my next one is from your song "Embrace the Disaster." So the lyric is: "Sometimes we spin out of control. Sometimes we see all that's wrong, stuck in the same damn roles. As time moves faster, but when we take it slow, hold on to what makes us strong. Accepting the flaws in this show." And whatever comes after, embrace the disaster.
Yeah, man, that's, you know, it inspired from relationship, but also applicable to life, I think. And even from just, you kind of got to just embrace what comes and go with it, because that's just part of life, whether it's from, you know, your friends to your partner to the president of the United States.
Right. Which, yeah. And yep. I was going to ask you too about your song. So going away from, and I, before we leave that, I just love your song, Embrace the Disaster, and me reading it doesn't do it nearly justice. You know, everybody listening to this podcast, go listen to the song because the melody and the way it's sung is beautiful. Not like me reading it back.
Thanks, man.
But your song "All American Mutt" in 2016 that came out in sort of a you know, politically, well, it's still politically charged right now, but especially in 2016. Was that song born from that time, or how did that come about and your decision to release it in that time?
Yeah, I think that, I don't know whether it was intentional. My family really is from all sorts of places. I'm like a eight part mutt. So I've always I've never related to one sort of ethnicity or one sort of group of people or religion in any way. And so I've always thought myself that way. And so it was inspired first by my family, and then the climate was just sort of out of control. And I just wanted to do something that I felt that a divide was just growing and growing, and wanted to have my attempt to bridge that in some way and, you know, remind people that we all are mutts in the end of the day. So
yeah, the timing of the song coming out was, you know, it was well timed. I feel like it was a needed song in the sort of political moments.
Yeah, I wish it wasn't needed, but
right.
Unfortunately, it was. Still is.
Sure. And still is. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I was listening to it as I was, you know, prepping this morning for the show, and just, you know, it's a good reminder of everybody's a mutt and we're all in this together.
Yeah, exactly. We got more in common than we think.
Yes. Hey, what's one of the best investments that you've made in your career?
That's a good question. I would say I mean, probably my education, is one of them. And from a very practical to a band van. that literally was, I can't tell you how many miles and stories and shows it took us to. Without that, I don't know where we'd be.
Yeah. And you talked about a lot earlier, but your education in the business school at Babson is...
Yeah, that just keeps paying itself off. And I think that it's funny. I so believe that. I also, at the same time, in terms of the educational system right now, I'm a bit wary of just going to college to go to college, right, and getting $200,000 in debt and coming out of it with a liberal arts degree and ending up working a job that you would have worked anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So that institutional system I have a lot of questions about right now. I feel like our generation has been convinced to go to school, come out with a ton of debt, and then not have great paying jobs, and we're kind of swimming in debt. That said, I think if you're going to go to school, again, like a song or like anything, do it with purpose and do it with how can this investment pay itself off? You know what I mean? And for me, it's changed the way I think, and it's allowed me to make more money and view the world differently. And even just in terms of the network of the school I went to, it's been so helpful. And there's been people that have been alumni that have helped me out along the way and booked me for shows and given me opportunities. And that's important. So even depending on what school you go to, think about that. That's like a few levels deep.
Man, you hit on some great stuff there. And being a college basketball coach at Chapman and professor, in my recruiting, and when we talk to kids and who are interested in coming out to Chapman, those are the conversations I have with a lot of them is, why would you want to come here? It's expensive. So don't just come here just to find yourself and think, because it's a lot of money.
You're right.
But
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, the network, if you want to go to Chapman's business school, which is fantastic, then, you should be thinking, okay, I want to live in Southern California and I want to use it to do this, do that. And you've been someone that's connected the dots quite well. So it's obviously a good investment that you've made.
Yeah, I really, and it's such a weird thing to think about in terms of college. And I feel like a lot of people frown on that because no, you're going to get an education. But my favorite list in terms of a college list would be what college has the best return on your investment.
No, right.
And if that's what I will eventually look at when I have kids. And it's and it's such a weird one because most people don't, but I think it's so important at this point.
I 100% agree with you. Yeah. And it's so expensive now. It's crazy.
Totally. And then, because you could see different, it also depends on what you want to do. A couple of my band members didn't go to college and they have the same opportunity. They're just so good that they didn't have to. And that's the thing. If you go to Berklee School of Music, you're not supposed to graduate there. If you graduate, you fail, because if you're supposed to get picked up on a gig and sent off on the road kind of thing, you know what I mean?
That's interesting.
And so if you're a musician and you believe in yourself wholeheartedly, then that might not be the path for you. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but it's just, again, think about how much money you're going to spend and how that's going to pay itself back.
Cool. Hey, is there a book or two that has been sort of a guiding light in some way, shape, or form in your career?
Yeah, totally. Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers has been a big one for me.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it talks about it follows all the people that have done great things in the world and shows that in order to get there, they all have put in 10,000 hours into what they do. And that it really just comes down to hard work. And that to me is inspiring, and it's attainable. It's not just this person was just gifted beyond measure. And, you can't just, if you're not born with that, you can't just acquire that gift. But if a lot of it's hard work, you can do that. Anyone can do that.
Right. Gladwell's one of my favorite writers for sure. He's got a couple other great ones. Yeah.
Yeah, mine too, for sure.
Well, hey, Jamie, this has been a really, really great interview. You've shed light on a ton of really interesting and in-depth topics. And I thank you for coming on the show. before we are done here, I want to just give you the last word. And so anything else that you want to talk about, it's kind of yours as we end it.
Well, man, I really appreciate you having me on here. And if anybody ever wants to reach out for advice on making a career as an independent musician, I'm always open and I'm always willing. And I think it's so important that every step we take, we turn around and give a hand to the person trying to get there with us. And people have helped me, and I want to help other people. So feel free to reach out if anybody's listening.
Cool. Well, thanks, Jamie. We will see you soon.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate you having me, man.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this edition of the Beautiful Work Podcast featuring Jamie Kent. To find out more about Jamie Kent and his music and all that he's doing, please visit jamiekent.com and follow along with him. You will not be disappointed. For updates and to follow along about this podcast as well as my music, please sign up for our newsletter. You can find that at dankrikorian.com. Thank you to Jack Carlino, who provides the artwork for the Beautiful Work Podcast. Follow him at Jack Captures Light on Instagram. As always, whatever you're doing, wherever you are, keep making that beautiful work. See you next time.